Bear cub caught in a car wash brush tunnel. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Car Wash as Mia Chen adjusted her baby daughter Luna in the car seat. The 9-month-old babbled happily, her tiny fingers reaching toward the colorful soap dispensers visible through the window. Mia smiled, checking her watch. She had 20 minutes before her job interview downtown, just enough time for a quick wash. "Almost done, sweetie," Mia whispered, stepping out to pay at the counter. Luna's bright eyes followed her mother's movements, then drifted toward the mechanical brushes that hung like sleeping giants in the wash tunnel. Behind the facility, where thick pine trees bordered the property, a small brown bear cub pushed through the undergrowth. The 6-month-old cub had wandered far from his mother, drawn by the strange sounds echoing from the human structure. His nose twitched at unfamiliar scents, soap, rubber, and something sweet that had spilled near the entrance. The cub's curiosity overcame his natural caution. He padded closer, his small paws silent on the wet pavement. The spinning brushes fascinated him, their rhythmic movement hypnotic. A piece of colorful foam drifted past, and he swatted at it playfully. Inside the minivan, Luna pressed her face against the window. Her mother was still talking to the attendant, gesturing toward something on the payment screen. The baby's attention shifted to movement near the car wash entrance. A small, dark shape moved between the massive brushes. The cub stepped deeper into the tunnel, enchanted by the swirling water and foam. The brushes moved slowly now, between customers, their wet bristles dripping steadily. He didn't notice the sensor beam he crossed, or the mechanical hum that grew louder as the system prepared for its next cycle. Mia turned back toward her car, receipt in hand, when she heard the first mechanical click. The car wash was cycling again, even though no vehicle had entered. She frowned, looking around for the attendant. The brushes lurched to life with a sudden roar. Water exploded from hidden nozzles, and the massive rotating cylinders began their violent dance. The bear cub, caught in the center of the tunnel, let out a terrified yelp as soap and water crashed over his small body. Luna's eyes widened. Through the chaos of spray and foam, she could see the dark shape struggling against the spinning brushes. The cub's frightened cries pierced through the mechanical noise, high and desperate. The baby's tiny hands flattened against the window glass. Something deep in her infant mind recognized distress, recognized fear. Her own soft whimper began to build in her throat. Mia ran toward the control panel, shouting for help, but the attendant had disappeared into the office. The emergency stop button was protected by a clear plastic cover, and her fumbling fingers couldn't find the release mechanism. Inside the tunnel, the cub was being pushed deeper by the relentless rotation of the brushes. His wet fur caught in the bristles, and each movement only tangled him further. Water filled his eyes and nose, making it impossible to see or breathe properly. Luna's whimper became a wail. Not the demanding cry of hunger or discomfort, but something different. Something that seemed to carry the weight of the cub's terror, as if she felt every moment of his panic. The sound cut through everything. The rush of water, the hum of motors, even Mia's frantic shouts. It was pure, heartbreaking, and impossible to ignore. From the tree line, another sound answered, low, rumbling, and filled with a mother's rage. The mother bear emerged from the shadows like a living mountain, her massive frame silhouetted against the morning light. Her dark eyes locked onto the car wash tunnel where her cub's cries grew weaker by the second. She had been foraging near the stream when the wind carried his distress calls to her. Now, every maternal instinct screamed for action. Mia's blood turned to ice as she spotted the approaching bear. Her hands shook as she finally managed to lift the plastic cover on the emergency panel, but her fingers were too slick with panic to grip the red button properly. The bear was moving with terrifying purpose, each step bringing her closer to the tunnel where Luna sat, trapped in the minivan. Inside the car wash, the cub had stopped fighting. His small body hung limp in the tangle of bristles, consciousness fading as water continued to pummel his exhausted form. The brushes had wound his fur so tightly that he could barely breathe, let alone struggle free. Luna's cries intensified, her small face red with the effort of expressing something she couldn't understand. Her tiny fingers pressed harder against the window, leaving small handprints on the glass. Through her tears, she could see the dark shape in the tunnel growing still. The mother bear's roar shattered the morning calm. It was a sound that spoke of primal fury, of a parent's worst nightmare unfolding. Customers who had been watching the spectacle with curious amusement suddenly scattered, their phones forgotten as survival instincts kicked in. But something unexpected happened. As the mother bear's roar echoed across the parking lot, Luna's crying stopped. The baby's eyes widened, not with fear, but with recognition. In that roar, she heard the same desperate love she felt from her own mother, the same protective fury that would move mountains. Mia finally slammed her palm against the emergency button. The brushes shuddered to a halt, but the damage was already done. The cub hung motionless in the tangled bristles, his small chest barely rising and falling. The attendant, Jake Morrison, burst from the office at the sound of screaming customers. His 23 years had never prepared him for anything like this. One look at the approaching mother bear sent him scrambling for the facility's toolbox, searching for something, anything, that might free the trapped cub before his mother decided to tear the entire car wash apart. Luna had gone completely silent now, her gaze fixed on something beyond the chaos. She raised one tiny hand and pressed it flat against the window, fingers splayed wide. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the parking lot fell quiet except for the steady drip of water from the halted brushes. The mother bear stopped her charge. Something in the baby's gesture, in the perfect stillness of that small hand against glass, penetrated her rage. She had seen this before, in her own cubs. The reaching gesture that meant comfort, safety, understanding. Jake's hands trembled as he approached the tunnel with bolt cutters. The metal teeth of the brushes had created a mechanical prison around the small cub. One wrong move could injure the animal further, but leaving him there meant certain death. "Easy now," Jake whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the cub, the mother bear, or himself. The mother bear watched every movement, her massive body coiled for action, but she held her position. Mia realized with growing horror that her car was parked directly between the mother bear and her cub. Luna sat in the middle of a standoff that could turn deadly in seconds. She reached for the car door handle, but stopped. Any sudden movement might trigger the bear's protective instincts. As Jake worked to free the first section of tangled fur, the cub's eyes fluttered open. The small bear was alive, but barely conscious. His breathing was shallow, and pink foam dotted his muzzle where the brushes had been too rough. Luna made a soft cooing sound, the same gentle noise she made when her mother read to her at bedtime. The sound carried across the silent parking lot, reaching both bears with impossible clarity. The mother bear's ears pricked forward. She had heard her cubs make similar sounds when they were content, safe. But this sound came from the small human in the metal den. She tilted her massive head, trying to understand. Jake managed to cut through another section of tangled bristles. The cub's body sagged as the pressure released, but he was still trapped by his hind legs. The bolt cutters were too large for the delicate work needed now. "I need smaller tools," Jake called out, his voice cracking with stress. But the mother bear was moving again, and this time she wasn't stopping. She approached the minivan with slow, deliberate steps. Her massive paws made no sound on the wet pavement. Mia pressed herself against the driver's side door, every muscle tensed for flight, but she couldn't abandon Luna. The mother bear stopped just inches from the passenger window where Luna sat. The baby's hand was still pressed against the glass, tiny fingers spread wide. The bear raised her own massive paw, dark claws extending, and placed it against the window directly opposite Luna's hand. For one impossible moment, mother bear and human child connected across the barrier of glass and species. Luna's eyes never left the bear's face, and something passed between them that neither Mia nor Jake could fully understand. The cub in the tunnel made a weak, whimpering sound. His mother's head snapped toward the noise, but she didn't move away from Luna's window. Instead, she made a sound Jake had never heard from a bear before, soft, almost musical, like a mother humming to comfort a frightened child. Luna responded with her own soft sounds, baby talk that somehow seemed to match the rhythm of the bear's gentle rumbling. The conversation continued for precious seconds while Jake worked frantically to free the last tangles holding the cub prisoner. Then, something extraordinary happened. The mother bear turned away from Luna and walked slowly toward the tunnel entrance. She had made a decision that defied every natural instinct. She was trusting the humans to save her cub. Jake's hands steadied as he worked. The bear's trust felt like a sacred responsibility. He switched to needle-nose pliers from his toolkit, carefully working each bristle free from the cub's matted fur. The small bear's breathing grew stronger as the pressure released. But just as freedom seemed within reach, a new complication arose. The car wash's automatic timer system kicked in, and warning lights began flashing. The system was programmed to resume its cycle after maintenance stops, and Jake realized with growing panic that they had less than 60 seconds before the brushes would start spinning again. The mother bear saw the flashing lights too. Some instinct told her that danger was returning. Her protective roar filled the air as she charged toward the tunnel, ready to face the mechanical monsters that threatened her cub. Luna's response was immediate and unexpected. The baby began to cry again, but not with fear or distress. These were demanding cries, the imperious wails of an infant who wanted attention and wanted it now. The sound was so purely human, so utterly ordinary that it cut through everyone's panic like a blade. The mother bear stopped mid-charge, confusion replacing rage. This small human was not afraid. She was angry, indignant, making the same sounds the bear's own cubs made when they wanted something. In that moment of hesitation, Jake freed the last tangle and the cub tumbled into his arms. The timer hit 0. The brushes roared back to life, spinning wildly in the empty tunnel. If Jake had been 30 seconds slower, if the mother bear had charged when the lights first flashed, if Luna hadn't provided that crucial moment of distraction, the story would have ended very differently. Jake stumbled backward, clutching the semi-conscious cub as soap and water exploded where they had been standing moments before. The cub was free, but he was also badly injured, his breathing labored and his small body limp with exhaustion. The mother bear's eyes locked onto her cub in Jake's trembling arms. For a terrifying moment, Jake thought she might attack, driven by the sight of a human holding her injured baby. But something in Luna's continued soft cooing seemed to hold the massive animal in check. Mia watched in amazement as her 9-month-old daughter continued making gentle sounds toward the bears. Luna had never shown this kind of response to animals before. At the zoo, she had been indifferent to the displays. At the park, she barely noticed dogs or squirrels. But now she seemed completely focused on communicating with these wild creatures. Jake knelt slowly, placing the injured cub on the wet pavement between himself and the mother bear. The small animal's fur was matted with soap and blood from where the bristles had scraped too roughly. His breathing was shallow, and his eyes remained closed. The mother bear approached with infinite care, her massive bulk moving with surprising gentleness. She sniffed her cub, then looked up at Jake with what could only be described as gratitude. But the cub wasn't responding to her nudges. He lay still, too still. Dr. Sarah Whitfield had been driving past when she saw the crowd gathering in the car wash parking lot. As Riverside's only veterinarian, she recognized a crisis when she saw one. She pulled her truck to the side of the road and grabbed her emergency kit, not quite believing what she was seeing as she approached. "I'm a vet," she called out, keeping her voice calm and steady. The mother bear's head swung toward this new human, her protective instincts flaring again. But Luna's response was immediate and surprising. The baby began clapping her tiny hands together, the universal sign of joy and approval. The sound echoed across the parking lot, and somehow it seemed to communicate that this new person was welcome, was safe. Dr. Whitfield had treated everything from horses to hamsters in her 15 years of practice, but she had never worked on a wild bear cub with his mother watching every move. Her hands shook slightly as she opened her medical bag. "The cub's in shock," she announced, checking his pulse and breathing. "His temperature is dropping, and he may have internal injuries from the pressure of those brushes. We need to get him warm and stabilized immediately." Jake looked around desperately. "Should we take him to your clinic?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Whitfield replied, glancing at the mother bear who hadn't moved more than a few feet from her cub. Separating them now could kill him. Bears this young need their mother's warmth and comfort to survive trauma. But I can't treat him properly here in a parking lot. Mia found herself speaking up, surprising everyone, including herself. What if we moved them somewhere safer? Somewhere close by, but more protected? The mother bear's ears pricked at the sound of Mia's voice. She had been listening to Luna's gentle sounds for several minutes now, and somehow she associated this larger human with the small one who had shown such kindness. Dr. Whitfield considered the problem. The cub needed immediate medical attention, but moving him away from his mother was impossible. The mother bear had shown remarkable restraint so far, but her tolerance might not extend to loading her cub into a vehicle. "There's an old maintenance shed behind the car wash," Jake offered. "It's got electricity and water. We use it for storage, but it's clean and dry." Luna chose that moment to make another of her soft cooing sounds, and incredibly, the mother bear responded with a gentle rumble. The two seemed to be having an ongoing conversation that none of the humans could fully understand, but all of them could feel. "She's approving the plan," Mia whispered, hardly believing her own words. Dr. Whitfield looked skeptical. Bears don't approve plans. They react on instinct. But as Jake slowly lifted the injured cub again, the mother bear didn't attack. Instead, she walked alongside him as he carried her baby toward the shed, staying close enough to intervene if needed, but allowing the human to help. Luna's excitement was visible. She bounced in her car seat, still making encouraging sounds, her tiny hands pressed against the window as she watched the strange procession. The maintenance shed was larger than it looked from an outside. Jake cleared a space near an electrical outlet while Dr. Whitfield unpacked her equipment. The mother bear investigated every corner, sniffing for threats, before settling near her cub with a heavy sigh. "I need more supplies than what I have here," Dr. Whitfield admitted, checking the cub's vital signs again. "His condition is stabilizing, but he's going to need antibiotics, IV fluids, and possibly surgery if there's internal bleeding." "How long before you know?" Mia asked, surprising herself by caring so deeply about a wild animal she'd never seen before today. A few hours, at least, maybe longer. Dr. Whitfield looked at the mother bear, who was gently licking her cub's matted fur. The real problem is that she won't leave his side, and I can't bring a full surgical setup here. Luna had been unusually quiet during the move to the shed, but now she began making a new sound. Not crying or cooing, but a rhythmic babbling that seemed almost like speech. The mother bear's ears perked up, and she turned toward the shed door where Mia stood holding her daughter. "She wants to come in," Mia said, though she had no idea how she knew this. Jake looked alarmed. A baby in there with a wild bear? But the mother bear was already moving toward the door, her eyes fixed on Luna. She stopped just inside the threshold, close enough to touch but making no aggressive moves. Dr. Whitfield watched in fascination as Luna reached out her tiny hands toward the massive animal. I've read about interspecies communication, but I've never seen anything like this. The mother bear lowered her great head until it was level with Luna's car seat. The baby's fingers barely grazed the coarse fur on the bear's snout, but the contact seemed to calm both of them. "It's like she understands that Luna helped save her cub," Mia whispered. What happened next defied all of Dr. Whitfield's training and experience. The mother bear lay down next to her injured cub and made a low, rumbling sound that was clearly an invitation. Luna responded immediately, reaching toward the bears with both hands. She wants down, Mia realized, though every parental instinct screamed against it. "Absolutely not," Jake said firmly. "That's a wild animal, not a pet." But Luna's babbling became more insistent, and the mother bear responded with increasingly gentle sounds. The conversation between baby and bear continued for several minutes while the adults watched in amazement. Dr. Whitfield was monitoring the cub's breathing when she noticed something remarkable. His vital signs are improving. His heart rate is steadying, and his breathing is deeper. The cub's eyes fluttered open for the first time since the rescue. He was weak, but alert. His small head turned toward the sound of Luna's voice, and he made a soft, whimpering sound. Luna's response was immediate. She began making the same gentle cooing sounds that had first caught the mother bear's attention, but now they seemed directed specifically at the injured cub. "It's working, Doctor," Whitfield said in amazement. "Whatever she's doing, it's having a positive effect on him." The cub tried to lift his head toward Luna's voice. The effort exhausted him, but his eyes remained open, focused on the baby who had somehow played a role in his rescue. Mia made a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour earlier. "I'm going to let her down, just for a moment." Jake started to protest, but the mother bear's reaction stopped him. She had been watching Mia intently, and when the human mother began to lower Luna toward the ground, the bear moved protectively closer to her own cub while keeping her eyes on the human baby. Luna's tiny hands touched the shed floor, and she immediately began crawling toward the bears. Mia stayed close, ready to snatch her daughter away at the first sign of danger. But danger never came. Instead, the mother bear gently extended one massive paw, allowing Luna to grab onto her fur and pull herself closer. The baby settled between the mother bear and her cub, continuing her soft vocalizations. The injured cub responded by lifting his head and touching his nose to Luna's outstretched hand. The contact lasted only a second, but something passed between them that left everyone in the shed speechless. Dr. Whitfield checked her instruments again. His temperature is rising. Blood pressure is stabilizing. I don't understand it, but he's definitely getting stronger. Outside the shed, the morning had attracted quite a crowd. Word had spread through Riverside about the bear rescue, and people were gathering in the car wash parking lot, keeping a respectful distance but clearly fascinated by the unfolding drama. Officer David Martinez arrived just as the crowd was getting too large to manage safely. As Riverside's only police officer, he had dealt with wild animal situations before, but never anything like this. "I've called the Department of Natural Resources," he told Jake. "They're sending a wildlife team, but it'll be at least 2 hours before they get here." Jake looked worried. What happens when they arrive? "Standard protocol is to relocate wild animals away from populated areas," Officer Martinez replied. "But given the circumstances—" His voice trailed off as he peered into the shed and saw Luna sitting peacefully between 2 wild bears while a veterinarian worked to save the cub's life. "This isn't standard anything," he admitted. The wildlife team's arrival would bring new complications. Dr. Whitfield knew from experience that government protocols rarely accounted for the kind of extraordinary situation developing in the maintenance shed. But for now, in this quiet moment, a human baby and 2 bears had found a connection that transcended species, language, and logic. Luna continued her gentle sounds while the mother bear watched over both cubs with equal devotion. The injured cub was growing stronger by the hour, responding to treatments that seemed to work better in Luna's presence. Dr. Whitfield had no scientific explanation for what she was witnessing, but she couldn't argue with the results. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the maintenance shed had become an unlikely nursery, where the most ancient bond between mother and child had expanded to include species that had no business trusting each other. But outside, the growing crowd and the approaching wildlife team threatened to shatter this fragile peace. The next few hours would determine whether this remarkable connection could survive the intrusion of the outside world. The first hint of trouble came when Luna suddenly stopped her gentle cooing and began to fuss. The mother bear's ears immediately pricked forward, sensing the baby's distress even before Mia could react. The injured cub, who had been resting peacefully, also grew restless. Dr. Whitfield looked up from her medical equipment, puzzled. "Their stress levels are spiking simultaneously. It's like they're responding to something we can't detect yet." Officer Martinez stepped outside the shed and immediately understood. 3 black SUVs with government plates were pulling into the parking lot, their occupants already suiting up in protective gear. The Department of Natural Resources wildlife team had arrived early, and they looked prepared for a dangerous situation. "They're treating this like a hostile animal encounter," Officer Martinez muttered, recognizing the tactical approach from his police training. Team leader Rebecca Santos stepped out of the lead vehicle, surveying the scene with professional detachment. Her 20-year career with DNR had taught her that human-wildlife conflicts usually ended badly for the animals. The crowd of onlookers only complicated matters. "Status report," she commanded Jake, who had emerged from the shed looking increasingly worried. "The cub was injured in our car wash equipment," Jake explained quickly. "Dr. Whitfield has been treating him, but the mother won't leave his side. They're not aggressive, they're actually calm." Rebecca's expression remained skeptical. Wild bears are never truly calm around humans. What we're seeing is a temporary behavioral anomaly, probably stress-induced. Our job is to relocate them before someone gets hurt. Inside the shed, the mother bear was growing agitated. She could smell the approaching humans, could sense their tension and purpose. Her protective instincts flared as she positioned herself more defensively around both her cub and Luna. Mia felt the change immediately. "Something's wrong. She's scared." Dr. Whitfield nodded grimly. "The cub's vital signs are deteriorating again. His breathing is becoming labored and his heart rate is elevated. Whatever's happening out there is affecting him." Luna began to cry, not her earlier communicative sounds, but genuine distress calls. The sound seemed to pierce straight through the mother bear's growing anxiety, and she responded with soft rumbling sounds that were clearly meant to comfort. Rebecca Santos entered the shed with 2 armed wildlife officers, their tranquilizer guns clearly visible. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and terrifying. She reared up on her hind legs, standing nearly 7 feet tall, her roar shaking the metal walls of the shed. "Everyone, out!" Rebecca shouted. "Now!" But Luna's response stopped everyone in their tracks. Instead of crying harder at the terrifying sight of an enraged bear, the baby reached out her tiny hands toward the massive animal and made the softest, most trusting sound imaginable. The mother bear looked down at Luna, then at the armed officers, then back at the baby. The conflict in her eyes was visible. Every instinct told her to attack the threat, but Luna's presence seemed to anchor her to gentleness. "I need everyone to lower their weapons and back away slowly, Doctor," Whitfield said quietly. "She's not attacking because of the baby, but if you force her to choose between protecting her cub and protecting Luna, someone is going to get hurt." Rebecca had never encountered anything like this situation. Her protocols called for immediate tranquilization and removal, but the presence of a human infant complicated everything. "We can't leave a baby in there with wild bears." "You can't separate them either," Dr. Whitfield replied firmly. "The cub is in critical condition. The stress of losing his mother or being moved could kill him, and somehow Luna's presence is helping him heal." The standoff continued for tense minutes. The mother bear remained standing, ready to defend both cubs from what she perceived as a threat. Luna continued making soft sounds, seemingly unaware of the danger. The injured cub's breathing grew more labored with each passing moment. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd outside, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "That's my granddaughter in there," Eleanor Chen called out, her weathered face filled with determination. At 78, Mia's mother had seen enough of life to recognize something extraordinary when it happened. She walked straight up to Rebecca Santos, ignoring the protests of the wildlife officers. "Young lady, I've been watching from my apartment window. That bear isn't hurting anyone. She's protecting that baby just like she's protecting her own." Eleanor's presence seemed to shift something in the crowd's energy. People began sharing what they had witnessed: the mother bear's gentle behavior, Luna's remarkable communication with the animals, the peaceful scene in the shed. "My daughter called me after she saw what happened," said Maria Gonzalez, a local teacher. "She said the baby was talking to the bears. I thought she was being dramatic, but now—" Dr. Whitfield seized the opportunity. "Mrs. Santos, I need you to see this for yourself." But slowly, calmly, with no weapons visible. Rebecca hesitated. Every protocol she knew said to prioritize human safety above all else, but the testimonies from multiple witnesses, combined with the unprecedented nature of the situation, made her pause. She entered the shed alone, her tranquilizer gun holstered but accessible. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about wildlife behavior. The mother bear had settled back down but remained alert. Luna sat between the 2 bears, her tiny hand resting on the injured cub's fur while she made soft babbling sounds. The cub's eyes were open, focused on the baby's face with an expression that looked remarkably like contentment. "His breathing has improved again," Dr. Whitfield reported quietly. "Heart rate is stabilizing. Whatever connection exists between these animals and this baby, it's having measurable medical benefits." Rebecca knelt slowly, staying well back from the bears, but close enough to observe. In her 2 decades of wildlife management, she had never seen anything remotely similar. The mother bear acknowledged her presence with a glance, but showed no aggression. "How long has this been going on?" Rebecca asked. "About 3 hours now," Mia replied, "ever since Luna first heard the cub crying in the car wash." Outside, the crowd had grown to include news crews from 3 local stations. The story of a baby communicating with bears was spreading rapidly through social media, drawing people from surrounding towns. Rebecca's radio crackled with updates from her team. "We've got media trucks arriving. County supervisors asking for a status report. What's our timeline for resolution?" The question hung in the air. Resolution could mean many things, from the bears being safely relocated to a tragedy that would haunt everyone involved. Dr. Whitfield checked her watch. "The cub needs another 2 hours of treatment minimum. His internal injuries are healing, but he's not stable enough to be moved yet. And the mother won't leave without him," Mia added. "And Luna won't leave without both of them," Eleanor observed, having moved closer to watch her granddaughter's extraordinary behavior. Rebecca faced an impossible decision. Protocol demanded immediate action, but the reality on the ground defied every guideline she had ever followed. The bears were calm, the baby was safe, and medical treatment was progressing successfully. Her radio crackled again. "Rebecca, this is County. We're getting calls from state wildlife officials. They want a resolution within the hour." The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Media attention meant political attention, which meant demands for quick, decisive action. But quick action in this situation could be catastrophic. Then Luna did something that changed everything again. She looked directly at Rebecca and made a sound that was unmistakably a greeting, the same ba-ba-ba sound that babies make when they're happy to see someone. The mother bear turned to see what Luna was responding to, and her gaze settled on Rebecca with what looked like evaluation rather than hostility. For a long moment, human and bear regarded each other while a baby bridged the gap between their worlds. Rebecca made a decision that could end her career. "I'm declaring this a medical emergency situation. The injured animal is receiving treatment, the mother is non-aggressive, and removing them could result in death. We maintain the status quo until the cub is medically cleared for transport." Her team's radio responses were immediate and concerned. "Rebecca, County is not going to accept that. They want those bears gone now." "Then County can come down here and explain to a 78-year-old grandmother why they're willing to risk a baby's life and kill an injured animal for the sake of paperwork," Rebecca replied firmly. Eleanor Chen smiled approvingly. "I like this woman." But the celebration was premature. A new vehicle was pulling into the parking lot. A sleek black sedan with government plates that screamed high-level authority. Through the windshield, Rebecca could see a man in an expensive suit talking rapidly on his phone. Dr. Whitfield noticed the change in tension immediately. "What now?" "State Wildlife Director," Rebecca said grimly. "My boss's boss's boss, and he's never seen a situation he couldn't solve with a tranquilizer dart and a transport cage." The injured cub seemed to sense the approaching conflict. His breathing became labored again, and he made soft whimpering sounds that immediately caught Luna's attention. The baby responded with increasingly urgent babbling, as if trying to communicate something important. The mother bear's agitation returned full force. She could smell the stress hormones from the humans, could sense the building confrontation. Her protective instincts flared as she gathered both cubs closer to her massive body. "Everyone needs to stay calm," Dr. Whitfield warned. "The cub's condition is becoming critical again. Any more stress could cause him to go into shock." But outside, Director James Holbrook was stepping out of his sedan, his expression making it clear that he had not driven 3 hours to accommodate the wishes of a baby, a veterinarian, and a rogue wildlife officer. The real test of this extraordinary connection was about to begin. Director James Holbrook strode across the parking lot with the confidence of a man who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with proper authority and decisive action. His expensive suit looked out of place among the soap-stained pavement and concerned crowd, but his bearing commanded immediate attention. "Santos," he barked before he was even within normal conversation distance. "What the hell is going on here? I've got the governor's office calling me about bears in a car wash and some kind of circus involving a human infant." Rebecca stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. "Sir, we have a unique situation that requires—" "I don't care how unique it is," Holbrook interrupted, not breaking stride toward the shed. "We have protocols for a reason. Wild animals near humans get relocated or eliminated. Period." Inside the shed, the mother bear's reaction to Holbrook's aggressive voice was immediate and alarming. She rose to her full height again, her roar echoing off the metal walls with enough force to rattle the structure. Luna's response was equally immediate. She began crying with genuine fear for the first time all day. Dr. Whitfield moved protectively closer to both cubs. "Director Holbrook, I presume?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Whitfield, and I'm treating a critically injured animal that cannot be moved without risking death." Holbrook barely glanced at her. "Then we'll handle this the efficient way. 2 tranquilizer darts, load them in transport cages, relocate them to deep wilderness. Problem solved." "The cub won't survive transport," Dr. Whitfield said firmly, "and separating him from his mother will kill him faster than his injuries." "That's unfortunate, but not my problem," Holbrook replied with bureaucratic coldness. "My problem is liability. Every second these animals remain near civilians increases our exposure to lawsuits, media criticism, and political fallout." Eleanor Chen had been listening to this exchange with growing anger. At 78, she had survived the Cultural Revolution, immigrated to America with nothing, and raised 3 children while working 2 jobs. She had no patience for men who put paperwork above life. "Young man," she said, stepping directly into Holbrook's path, "you will not harm those animals while my granddaughter is with them." Holbrook looked down at the elderly Chinese woman blocking his way with obvious irritation. "Ma'am, you need to understand that this is a state wildlife matter. We're trained professionals dealing with dangerous predators." "Dangerous?" Eleanor laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "The only dangerous thing I see here is your ignorance. That bear has been protecting my granddaughter for hours. She's shown more maternal instinct toward a human baby than some people show toward their own children." Inside the shed, something remarkable was happening despite the growing conflict outside. Luna had stopped crying and was making soft, urgent sounds toward the agitated mother bear. The massive animal lowered herself back down, responding to the baby's distress by becoming calmer herself. The injured cub, sensing his mother's reduced anxiety, managed to lift his head and touch his nose to Luna's outstretched hand again. The contact seemed to strengthen both of them. "Look at this," Dr. Whitfield called out, her voice carrying clearly to the group outside. "His vital signs are improving again, heart rate dropping, breathing steadying. This baby is literally helping to heal him." Holbrook remained unmoved. "I don't care if she's performing miracles. State regulations are clear, no exceptions for feel-good stories." But the crowd outside was growing restless. Word had spread through social media about the confrontation, and people were arriving from neighboring towns to witness what many were calling a modern miracle. Local news crews had been joined by reporters from regional networks. Maria Santos, a reporter from Channel 7, approached with her cameraman. "Director Holbrook, can you comment on reports that you're planning to separate a baby from the bears that saved her life?" "No one saved anyone's life," Holbrook snapped. "A wild animal got stuck in machinery. We're following standard procedures to resolve the situation safely. But witnesses say the baby and the bears have formed some kind of bond, Maria pressed. Are you really willing to destroy that for the sake of bureaucracy? Holbrook's face reddened. This is not a Disney movie. These are wild predators, and that baby is in imminent danger every second she remains near them. As if to directly contradict his words, Luna chose that moment to let out a delighted giggle. The sound carried clearly from the shed, where she was apparently playing some kind of game with the mother bear, who was gently moving her massive paw near the baby's reaching hands. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Murmurs of amazement rippled through the gathering, and several people began recording with their phones. The contrast between Holbrook's dire warnings and the joyful sounds from the shed could not have been more stark. Officer Martinez approached Holbrook with obvious reluctance. Sir, I need to inform you that we're getting calls from animal rights groups, child welfare advocates, and what appears to be half the internet. This situation is going viral. Holbrook pulled out his phone and scrolled through several news alerts, his expression growing darker with each headline. Bear, cub, and baby form miraculous bond. Wildlife officials threaten to destroy interspecies friendship. Government versus nature's love story. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid, he muttered. The longer this drags on, the worse the optics become. Rebecca saw an opportunity. Sir, what if we could demonstrate that the situation is actually safe? That the bears pose no threat to anyone? Absolutely not. I'm not risking civilian lives for a PR stunt. But Eleanor Chen was already walking toward the shed. Then I'm going in to get my granddaughter. If these bears are so dangerous, they'll have to go through me first. Ma'am, stop, Holbrook commanded. I cannot allow— You cannot allow? Eleanor turned back with fire in her eyes. This is still America, young man. You work for us, not the other way around. She continued toward the shed entrance, her steps steady and determined. The crowd held its collective breath as the elderly woman approached the doorway where a wild bear and her cub waited inside. The mother bear's reaction to Eleanor's approach was unlike anything anyone had seen yet. She made a soft, chuffing sound, the greeting call that bears use with family members. It was as if she recognized Eleanor as Luna's grandmother, as part of the baby's pack. Eleanor stepped into the shed without hesitation. Hello, beautiful, she said softly to the mother bear. Thank you for taking care of my granddaughter. The bear's response was a gentle rumble, almost like a cat's purr, but deeper and more resonant. Luna immediately reached toward her grandmother, babbling excitedly, while never breaking contact with the injured cub. Dr. Whitfield watched in amazement as Eleanor knelt down beside the three youngsters, human baby and two bear cubs, while the mother bear watched with obvious approval. The cub's vital signs just spiked positive again, Dr. Whitfield reported. It's like adding more family members to the situation makes him stronger, not weaker. Outside, Holbrook was facing a crisis of authority. The crowd was openly defying his commands. The media was portraying him as a villain, and now an elderly civilian was inside with the bears, completely undermining his claims about danger. His phone buzzed with a call from the governor's office. The conversation was brief and one-sided, consisting mainly of Holbrook saying, "Yes, sir," and "I understand, sir," while his face grew increasingly pale. When he hung up, Rebecca could see that the political winds had shifted decisively. "New orders?" she asked. "The governor wants a measured approach that respects both public safety and the unprecedented nature of the situation," Holbrook said through gritted teeth. Translation: Don't do anything that makes the state look bad on national television. But even as the immediate political pressure eased, a new problem was emerging. Dr. Whitfield had been monitoring her equipment carefully, and she was seeing concerning readings. "The cub's recovery has plateaued," she announced. "His vital signs are stable but not improving. He needs more advanced treatment than I can provide here. IV antibiotics, possibly surgery to repair internal damage." "How long before it becomes critical?" Rebecca asked. "Hours, maybe less. He's exceeded my ability to treat him in field conditions." Eleanor looked up from where she sat surrounded by bears and baby. "What does he need that you can't do here?" "A full veterinary hospital, surgery facilities, advanced monitoring equipment, sterile conditions." Dr. Whitfield's frustration was evident. "Everything I have at my clinic, basically." "Then why can't we take him there?" Eleanor asked, with the practical directness of someone who had solved problems all her life. "Because moving him away from his mother will kill him faster than his injuries," Dr. Whitfield replied. "And I can't bring a wild bear into my clinic." "What if the mother came too?" Mia suggested, speaking up for the first time in an hour. Holbrook's reaction was immediate and explosive. "Absolutely not. I will not authorize transporting dangerous wild animals through populated areas to a civilian veterinary facility. The liability alone would—" "Shut up," Eleanor said quietly, but with such authority that Holbrook actually fell silent. "Dr. Whitfield, is it possible? Medically speaking?" Dr. Whitfield considered the question seriously. "My clinic has a large animal facility. We treat horses and cattle. There's space, and the equipment is there. The real question is whether we could maintain this calm dynamic during transport and in a new environment." Luna answered for everyone by making a decisive babbling sound and patting both bears gently, as if giving her approval to the plan. The mother bear responded with a rumble that sounded remarkably like agreement. "They understand," Eleanor said simply. "They know the baby needs the little one to get better." Holbrook was frantically making phone calls, trying to find regulatory precedent for transporting wild bears to private veterinary facilities. His conversations grew increasingly heated as his superiors demanded creative solutions rather than bureaucratic obstacles. Meanwhile, the crowd outside had swelled to over 200 people. Local businesses were setting up food stands. Children were holding handmade signs reading "Save the Bear Family" and "Luna and Friends Free." The situation had evolved far beyond a simple wildlife incident. It had become a symbol of something deeper, the possibility of connection across impossible barriers, the power of innocence to heal ancient fears, the triumph of compassion over regulation. But time was running out for the injured cub, and the next few hours would determine whether this extraordinary bond could survive the transition from a car wash maintenance shed to the complicated world of veterinary hospitals, government permits, and media scrutiny. Dr. Whitfield was already planning the logistics of the most unusual patient transport of her career, while Eleanor continued to sit peacefully among the bears, her granddaughter bridging two worlds with nothing more than the pure trust of a 9-month-old child. The miracle was far from over, but its next chapter would test everyone involved in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Dr. Whitfield's veterinary clinic was only 15 minutes away by road, but those 15 minutes represented the most complex logistical challenge anyone present had ever faced. How do you transport a critically injured bear cub, his protective mother, and a human baby who had become essential to the healing process? "My largest transport vehicle can handle the mother bear," Dr. Whitfield explained, sketching out possibilities on the back of a medical form. "It's designed for horses, so there's enough space. But the real challenge is maintaining the calm we've established here." Eleanor, still sitting peacefully among the bears, looked up from where Luna was gently stroking the injured cub's fur. What if we all go together? The baby, me, maybe Mia too. If Luna is what's keeping everyone calm, then Luna needs to be part of the transport. Holbrook, who had been pacing frantically while making phone calls, overheard this suggestion and nearly choked. You want to put civilians in a vehicle with wild bears? That's not just against regulations, it's insane. What's insane? Eleanor replied with the patience of someone explaining basic facts to a slow child. Is your inability to see what's happening right in front of you. These bears aren't wild anymore, they're family. As if to emphasize the point, the mother bear gently nudged Luna with her massive snout, and the baby giggled in response. The injured cub lifted his head at the sound, his eyes brighter than they had been all day. Dr. Whitfield checked her instruments again. His condition is deteriorating. We need to move within the next hour, or it may be too late. Rebecca Santos had been coordinating with her team, but she approached with new concerns. I've been talking to transport specialists. The stress of moving could trigger aggressive behavior in the mother bear. If that happens in a confined space, it won't happen, Mia said quietly, surprising everyone with her certainty. Luna won't let it happen. The confidence in her voice made everyone turn to look at the baby, who was continuing her soft, babbling conversation with both bears. Luna seemed completely unaware that she was at the center of an impossible situation. Jake, who had been quietly observing from the shed entrance, stepped forward with an unexpected suggestion. What if we make the transport as much like this environment as possible? Dim lighting, quiet voices, familiar sounds. Familiar sounds, Dr. Whitfield asked. Luna's been making those gentle sounds all day. What if she keeps doing that during the transport? Like singing to them. Eleanor's eyes lit up with understanding. My granddaughter has been their comfort all day. She can be their comfort during the journey, too. Holbrook was frantically consulting his phone, reading regulations and liability clauses. Even if I could authorize this, which I'm not saying I can, the insurance implications alone would... His voice trailed off as he noticed something that made his blood run cold. News vans from major networks were pulling into the parking lot. CNN, NBC, ABC, the story had gone national. Oh, hell, he muttered. We're about to be on every evening news program in America. The arrival of national media changed everything. Within minutes, satellite trucks were setting up. Reporters were doing live broadcasts, and the story of Luna and the bears was being beamed across the country. Linda Chen, a CNN correspondent, was already doing a live report. This is an unprecedented situation where a 9-month-old baby appears to have formed a healing bond with wild bears. Government officials are now faced with the impossible choice between following protocol and preserving what many are calling a miracle. Inside the shed, the injured cub was growing weaker. His breathing became more labored, and his responses to Luna's gentle touches were less energetic. Time was running out. Dr. Whitfield made an executive decision. I'm authorizing emergency transport. The risk of moving him is now less than the risk of leaving him here. I haven't approved, Holbrook began. I don't need your approval for emergency veterinary care, Dr. Whitfield interrupted. This is a medical decision, not a bureaucratic one. Eleanor stood up carefully, lifting Luna while maintaining contact between the baby and the bears. We're going with them. Absolutely not, Holbrook said firmly. I cannot and will not authorize civilians to transport with dangerous wild animals. But Eleanor was already walking toward the shed entrance, carrying Luna, while the mother bear followed closely behind. The injured cub whimpered as the distance between him and Luna increased, and his vital signs immediately began to spike dangerously. "Stop!" Dr. Whitfield called out. "His heart rate is climbing. The separation is causing distress." Eleanor paused, and Luna reached back toward the bears with obvious distress. The baby's cries seemed to communicate urgency, and the mother bear responded with increasingly agitated sounds. "They can't be separated," Dr. Whitfield said with growing panic. "Not even for transport. The shock could kill him." The logistics nightmare was becoming impossible. They needed to transport the bears to save the cub's life, but they couldn't separate the bears from Luna without killing the cub, and they couldn't transport Luna with the bears without violating every safety protocol ever written. Then Officer Martinez approached with an unexpected solution. "What if we use the fire department's emergency transport vehicle? It's large enough for everyone, and it's equipped for medical emergencies." Fire Chief Robert Anderson had been monitoring the situation from the crowd, and he stepped forward when his department was mentioned. "Our emergency vehicle could handle this, but I'd need every liability waiver known to mankind." "The paperwork will take hours," Holbrook protested. "The cub doesn't have hours," Dr. Whitfield replied sharply. Chief Anderson looked at the crowd, at the media trucks, at the baby who was trying to comfort two bears while her grandmother held her steady. "Sometimes you do what's right first and worry about the paperwork later." His words were caught by multiple microphones and would be replayed on news broadcasts for days. Within minutes, Just Do What's Right was trending on social media. The fire department's emergency transport arrived within 10 minutes. A massive vehicle designed for disaster response, with medical equipment and space for multiple casualties. Chief Anderson and his team began setting up a mobile medical unit while Dr. Whitfield gathered her equipment. But just as the transport was being prepared, a new complication arose. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the state veterinarian, arrived with her own team and very different ideas about how to handle the situation. "I'm overriding this entire operation, Doctor," Walsh announced as she stepped out of her official vehicle. "Wild bears require specialized transport to approved facilities, not field trips to small-town veterinary clinics." Dr. Whitfield turned to face her colleague with barely controlled anger. "Jen, that cub will die if we don't get him proper treatment immediately. Then we'll treat him at the state wildlife facility, following proper protocols," Dr. Walsh replied coldly. "No exceptions for media circuses. Your wildlife facility is 3 hours away, and he doesn't have 3 hours," Dr. Whitfield shot back. "That's unfortunate, but state regulations are clear." Eleanor, who had been listening to this exchange while Luna continued comforting the bears, walked directly up to Dr. Walsh. "Young woman, look at what's happening here. Really look." Dr. Walsh glanced dismissively at the scene. "I see an elderly woman and a baby who need to be removed from a dangerous situation immediately." "Dangerous?" Eleanor laughed. "The only dangerous thing here is your willingness to let a baby animal die because it doesn't fit your forms." Luna chose that moment to make one of her soft cooing sounds, and both bears responded with gentle rumbles. The injured cub even managed to lift his head slightly, showing more energy than he had in the past hour. Dr. Walsh's expression remained unmoved. Wild animals exhibiting unusual behavior are often more dangerous, not less. This apparent docility could change without warning. But her words were interrupted by an unexpected arrival. A convoy of vehicles was pulling into the parking lot. Not government cars, but private vehicles driven by people who had been following the story online. Dr. Michael Torres, a veterinary surgeon from the state university, stepped out of the lead car. "I heard about this situation on the news. Dr. Whitfield, I'm here to assist however I can." Behind him came Doctor. Angela Rodriguez, a wildlife behavior specialist, and Dr. Samuel Kim, an expert in interspecies communication. Within minutes, Luna and the bears had an assembled team of experts who had driven from across the state to witness and support what they recognized as an unprecedented event. Dr. Walsh found herself outnumbered by colleagues who disagreed with her rigid interpretation of protocols. The political dynamics shifted again as respected academics threw their support behind the emergency transport plan. "This is still my jurisdiction, Doctor," Walsh insisted, but her authority was being undermined by peer pressure and media attention. Holbrook, meanwhile, was fielding calls from increasingly high-level officials. The story had reached Washington, where politicians were asking pointed questions about bureaucrats who seemed willing to sacrifice baby animals and heartwarming news stories for the sake of regulatory compliance. "The Secretary of Agriculture wants a briefing," Holbrook told Dr. Walsh quietly. "The President's communications director has been asking questions. This is way above our pay grade now." Inside the shed, the injured cub was fading fast. Dr. Whitfield's readings showed dangerously low blood pressure and irregular breathing. The window for successful treatment was closing rapidly. Luna seemed to sense the urgency. Her gentle sounds became more insistent, and she reached toward the cub with both hands, her tiny fingers barely brushing his fur, but somehow conveying comfort and encouragement. The mother bear responded to Luna's urgency by gently lifting her cub with her mouth, the way she would move him to safety in the wild. But instead of carrying him away, she moved him closer to Luna, placing him within easy reach of the baby's comforting touch. "She understands, Doctor," Torres observed with amazement. "The mother bear knows the baby is helping her cub heal, and she's facilitating the contact." Dr. Rodriguez was documenting everything with professional fascination. "I've studied animal behavior for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The level of interspecies communication and cooperation is unprecedented." The assembled experts began collaborating on the transport plan, their combined authority making it difficult for Dr. Walsh to maintain her opposition. "Chief Anderson had his emergency vehicle ready, Doctor. Whitfield had portable medical equipment prepared, and Eleanor was sitting with Luna and the bears, maintaining the calm that everyone agreed was essential. But as they prepared for the most unusual medical transport in veterinary history, none of them could have predicted the new challenge that was about to emerge. The injured cub's condition was about to take a turn that would test not just their medical skills, but the very limits of the extraordinary bond that had brought them all together. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the parking lot as the most complex rescue operation in Riverside's history prepared to begin. Luna continued her soft conversation with the bears, unaware that she was about to become part of medical history, while news cameras captured every moment of a story that was redefining what people thought they knew about the connections between species. The transport was ready, the team was assembled, and the bears were as calm as they had been all day. But the 15-minute journey to the veterinary clinic would prove to be the most challenging part of an already impossible day. The fire department's emergency vehicle had been transformed into a mobile sanctuary. Soft blankets covered the metal surfaces, dim lighting created a peaceful atmosphere, and portable medical equipment hummed quietly in the background. Dr. Whitfield positioned herself near the injured cub, while Eleanor settled into a corner with Luna, maintaining the physical connection that had become essential to everyone's well-being. The mother bear entered the vehicle with surprising grace, immediately positioning herself where she could see both her cub and Luna. Her massive presence filled the space, but her demeanor remained gentle, almost protective of all the young ones in her care. "Heart rate stable," Dr. Whitfield reported as they began the journey. "Breathing steady. Whatever magic is happening here, It's working. Luna continued her soft babbling throughout the journey, her tiny hands reaching between her grandmother and the bears, somehow maintaining connection with everyone simultaneously. The injured cub responded with barely audible whimpers that sounded almost like purrs. Outside, the convoy attracted attention at every intersection. Police escorts flanked the emergency vehicle while news helicopters circled overhead. Social media exploded with real-time updates as people tracked the journey to what many were calling the Miracle Clinic. Dr. Torres, following in his own vehicle, was coordinating with Dr. Whitfield's clinic staff to prepare for the most unusual surgery in veterinary history. The large animal facility was being converted into a specialized bear treatment center, with space maintained for Luna and Eleanor to remain close during the procedure. When they arrived at the clinic, hundreds of people had already gathered. The parking lot overflowed with supporters holding signs, families with children hoping to glimpse the famous baby and her bear friends, and reporters from around the world documenting every moment. The transfer from vehicle to clinic required precise coordination. The mother bear followed Luna and Eleanor without hesitation, trusting these humans who had shown such care for her cub. The crowd watched in absolute silence as the extraordinary procession moved from the parking lot into the veterinary facility. Inside the operating room, Dr. Whitfield worked with steady hands, while the assembled experts monitored both the cub's medical condition and the unprecedented social dynamics. Luna sat with Eleanor just close enough to maintain visual contact with the bears, her soft sounds providing continuous comfort throughout the delicate procedure. The surgery revealed internal bleeding that had been slowly draining the cub's strength, but the damage was repairable. Dr. Whitfield's skilled hands worked methodically, while Luna's gentle voice provided a soundtrack of encouragement that seemed to stabilize everyone in the room. 3 hours later, as the sun set over Riverside, the surgery was complete. The cub's vital signs were strong, his breathing clear, and his eyes bright with renewed life. The mother bear's relief was visible in every line of her massive body as she gently nuzzled her recovering baby. But the most extraordinary moment came when Luna, exhausted from her long day as peacemaker and healer, fell asleep between the two bears. The mother bear carefully positioned herself to shelter the human baby along with her own cub, creating a protective circle that encompassed both species. Dr. Whitfield documented the remarkable scene as Luna slept peacefully, her tiny hand resting on the recovering cub's fur, while the mother bear's massive paw created a gentle barrier around both babies. The image would become one of the most shared photographs in internet history. Outside, the crowd had grown into a celebration. Food trucks served free meals, children played games, and families shared stories of their own connections with animals. The parking lot had become an impromptu festival of compassion, with people from dozens of communities coming together to witness something beautiful. As night fell, arrangements were made for the bears to remain at the clinic during the cub's recovery. The mother bear had made it clear that she would not leave Luna, and Luna showed no interest in being separated from her new family. Eleanor moved a cot into the recovery room, prepared to spend the night watching over her granddaughter and the bears who had become part of their lives. Director Holbrook, faced with a situation that defied every regulation he knew, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I'm declaring this a special wildlife sanctuary situation," he announced to the assembled media. "These animals will remain under protective status for as long as necessary for the cub's full recovery." The announcement was met with cheers from the crowd and relief from everyone who had been part of the day's extraordinary events. For once, bureaucracy had bent to accommodate love rather than forcing love to conform to bureaucracy. Over the following days, as the cub grew stronger and Luna continued her gentle ministrations, something beautiful began to emerge. The clinic became a gathering place where people came not just to see the famous bear family, but to experience the simple truth that connection transcends species, language, and logic. Children brought drawings of Luna and the bears. Families shared their own stories of unusual animal friendships. Researchers arrived to study what they were calling the Luna effect, the measurable impact of interspecies emotional connection on healing and recovery. Dr. Whitfield established the Luna Wildlife Recovery Center, the first facility specifically designed to treat injured wildlife with human emotional support. The approach, initially met with skepticism from the veterinary community, showed remarkable success rates that could not be ignored. The mother bear and her cub eventually returned to the wild, but not before establishing a pattern that would be repeated countless times. They returned to the clinic regularly, bringing other injured animals to the place where healing happened through connection rather than just medicine. Luna, now a toddler, continued to work her magic with every animal that needed comfort. Her ability to communicate across species boundaries became legendary, drawing families from around the world to witness the child who could speak the universal language of love. Eleanor, at 79, found herself managing a wildlife center and teaching visitors about the power of seeing beyond differences to the connections that bind all living things. Her practical wisdom and fierce protectiveness created an environment where miracles happened daily. Years later, when Luna was old enough to understand the story of that remarkable day, she would listen with wonder to tales of the baby who brought together bears and humans, bureaucrats and rebels, fear and love. But to her, it had never been miraculous at all. It had simply been the most natural thing in the world. Reaching out to comfort someone who needed help, regardless of whether they walked on 2 legs or 4. The car wash still operated across town, but now it bore a plaque commemorating the day when mechanical brushes brought together 2 species in the most unlikely friendship. Tour buses stopped regularly, and Jake Morrison had become something of a local celebrity, telling the story of the morning when everything changed. The maintenance shed had been converted into a small museum, displaying photos and videos of Luna's first meeting with the bears. But the most popular exhibit was a simple recreation of that moment when a baby's hand pressed against glass met a bear's paw on the other side, proving that some connections are stronger than any barrier.